Well, it's been a full morning watching how God is at work in people's lives. But the reality is that once we make this declaration, we have to live our lives. And I don't know if any of you ever have trouble in your life as a follower of Jesus, or even if you're not a follower of Jesus. In particular, do you ever have trouble in your relationships? Do you ever have trouble and conflict with you and your spouse, or your siblings, or with your children, or with your parents, with your boss, with your employee, like your neighbor, the mother of the other child on the dance team? Yeah, conflict. You're sitting there, duh. Like, conflict is just seems to be a part of our lives. But there seems to be conflict, and then there's those conflicts that we just can't seem to figure out and get through. It just, the more we touch it, the worse it gets. How we respond and how other people respond determine the level of the conflict. And I want to talk briefly with you about that. Crystal and I had 3 young boys and had no idea how you raise 3 young boys. And so, of course, we were asking questions, reading books, trying to figure out how do we become good, effective parents for these 3 lives that have been entrusted to us by God for 20 or 25 years. We got a hold of a book, and the basic idea of the book was you need to shepherd the heart of your child. And I thought, hey, that's a great idea, a great metaphor, shepherding the heart of our child. And they explained in the book, essentially, that your child will tend to disobey, and that you need to provide discipline for every single time that they disobey, because it creates boundaries and security for the child. And then they will have peace if you provide discipline on every single thing they do wrong. And we thought, well, okay, let's give this a try. And we tried it for 2 days. I was a wreck, because every time I turned around, I had to be disciplining. I have 3 boys. I told you that, right? Every time I turn around, I'm disciplining something, and sometimes for the stupidest stuff that I normally wouldn't, I just laugh at. But I got to shepherd their heart, and I'm disciplined. And of course, what it's doing is making me exhausted and driving a wedge between me and them, and they're withdrawing. And I tell in just 2 days, they're starting to feel very insecure. And finally, Crystal and I looked at each other, and we just threw the book in the garbage and began to pray that they would never remember these 2 days and our failed parent attempt. Fast forward more than a decade. I won't say which one, but one of my sons is going, he's a teenager, going hard at Crystal and I because he wanted something. And he kept asking and asking and asking. I can't even remember what it was. And I kept saying, no, no, no. And finally, he stomped up the stairs. I still remember, boom, 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 stomping up the stairs, walked into his room, bam, slammed the door in anger. In fact, so hard that my neighbor called to say, did you feel that earthquake tremor that was how? Now, I knew I wasn't, I knew the disrespect of that slamming door had to be dealt with. I just didn't know how. And so I was thinking about it, and I was trying to calm down, and then I remembered how Crystal's dad had dealt with slamming of doors with her and her brothers and sisters. And so I went out to the garage, I went to my toolbox, I got my hammer, and I got a screwdriver, and I went up, and I took the door off the hinges. And he was like, you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. That's not right. And I said nothing. I just said, what's not right is the disrespect you showed me in slamming that door. And so I took the door off, didn't say any more than that. And then I went downstairs and I went back out in the garage. I know I was doing something. Crystal came to me about an hour later. And she said, come on in, you got to see this. So I walk in, I look up at the door. And he has taken the closet door off the hinges and put it on the door. Now, the closet door is narrow compared to the bedroom door, and so it only covers just a little over half of the space. And as he saw me looking, he said, well, you didn't say I couldn't take the closet door off. You just said I couldn't put the other door back on. And I said, well, yeah, you got a point. And so I kind of chuckled to myself. But see, there was still a big gap in the door, and the light was coming in, and there was no privacy. And so finally 2 days later, he came to me and he apologized and he said, can I have my door back? And I said, yes, you can put both doors back to where they belong, to which he did. And, we kind of chuckled over it, and there was no bad blood. There wasn't the anger and the confrontation going on. We just kind of laughed about it, and he's never slammed a door since. And so I've pondered that, and I thought, why is it in one case there was this frustration and anger and anxiety and this distance happening between me and my son over conflict, and in the other one, he totally different response. We're laughing, he apologizes, he doesn't slam the door again, he's got a great attitude toward me after he calmed down, and I'm thought, well, why the difference? And obviously I reacted differently in both situations, that's for sure, but there's more than that, because my teenage son did not like me taking the door off of his room, and yet there was no big explosion and everything else, and I thought, what was the difference? I came to find out that a man who lived 3,000 years ago by the name of Solomon has written extensively on relational conflict and relational issues. His wisdom is encompassed in a book called Proverbs in the Old Testament. And he says, generally, there are three types of people. There's many different kinds of people, but generally, from a scriptural point of view, there are three kinds of people. There's the wise, there's the foolish, and there's the evil. And each person reacts to situations differently. The wise act one way, the foolish another, the evil another. And now when you go into conflict, depending on which type of person you're dealing with, you will get a different response. No matter how good you are in a conflict situation, a person will respond that you can't control a person's response, and they will respond out of who they are. One of the verses that talks about this in the book of Proverbs, it's Proverbs chapter 9, verse 7. And Solomon writes, again, one of the wisest people to ever live, whoever corrects a mocker or a fool invites insults. So if you're going to get into conflict, if you're going to have a set-to with somebody who's foolish or is a mocker, they will respond with insults. But whoever rebukes a wicked will incur abuse. So if you get into a set-to or conflict with somebody who is wicked at their heart, they will respond with abuse. And so he says, don't rebuke mockers or they will hate you. Rebuke the wise, they will love you. Instruct the wise, they'll be wiser still. Teach the righteous, and they will add to their learning. Foolish people, when you get into conflict, when you try to correct them, when you try to instruct them, when you try to deal with an issue, they will respond with insult. They will respond back, even it says, with hatred. Now, they're not going to make fun of your haircut. That's not what it's saying. What it's saying is a foolish person always has an answer back for the words that you have to say. The defining characteristic of a foolish person is, I know. In Proverbs. I know. No matter what you're going to tell them, no, I know. And so they're defensive and they push back. And by hate, the word doesn't mean that they'll absolutely despise you. It means they will reject what you have to say to them. They will not receive you in what you're saying. And so when you're dealing with a foolish person, they will typically respond in an argument. It's an invitation to argue, to fight, to battle. Because that's how the heart of the foolish respond. I know, so I don't need to hear from you. But the wise are different, or the wicked or the evil are different. Solomon says you'll incur abuse when you deal with a wicked or an evil person. Whereas a foolish person will engage and respond verbally, an evil person responds with action. And that might sound good if I stopped it there, but their actions are abusive. Sometimes it's physical abuse, sometimes verbal abuse. They'll usually manipulate, try to undermine your position, talk bad about you, attack your character, speak evil of you, say things that are not true of you. The point of the evil person is to push you down and shut you up so you do not say or do anything to make you afraid. Where a fool will respond with words, the evil respond with actions. But the wise respond with love or learning. They're open. They receive from you what you have to say. It says the wise consider it a privilege to be rebuked. It does not mean they like it. It means that they understand that they could be wrong and they need to listen. There may be an emotional pushback initially, but they'll calm down and they'll hear what you have to say. They'll receive. They may not agree with you, but they'll at least listen. So what's this got to do with anything? Well, when you're dealing with conflict in your life, and just think about the person you're in conflict with. You know, when you're getting along with people, it's easy. Like when everything's good, it's easy to get along. It's when you have a conflict or a challenge or you need to correct. That's where the trouble will come. When there's an issue between you and you need to talk about it. Of course, Scripture will tell you that you need to prepare your heart. You need to go into it right. But it also says that the person you're talking to will respond out of their heart. And if they're foolish, they'll be verbal and they'll reject and they'll fight and they'll argue. If they're evil, they will reject and they'll power up and they'll attack. But if they're wise, they will listen. Now, I'm going to take a wild guess, that you have some conflict in your life. That you're struggling through an issue with somebody and you can't just seem to settle it. This is just one of the many verses in Scripture. And I believe that in learning what makes a foolish and a evil and a wise person, it will not only help us figure out how to be wise, because really, don't we want to be the wise person? Don't we want to respond in a mature and a healthy way, even if it's hard to receive? Don't we want to be wise? So it teaches us we can learn how to be wise, but we can also learn from the book of Proverbs how to deal with people who are foolish and how do you deal with them when they are evil. And over the next several weeks, all through to the end of May, we're going to be in these Solomon sessions, which are times to look at the wisdom of Solomon and how it applies to our relationships. And I think the touch point for us is particularly in times and in relationships when there's conflict or that uneasiness, or we're trying to deal with something and we don't seem to be moving ahead. And so I want to invite you to join us over the next number of weeks to listen to the wisdom of Solomon that can change the trajectory of your life and the relationship that you're in by the wisdom that he gives. You are welcome to join us here every Sunday at 10. Or bring somebody who you think, I wouldn't recommend saying, your life's a mess. You need to come to church with me. Say, hey, we're learning about relationships. Wonder if you're interested.